Thank you.
Uh-huh.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We can now have the reading of the mission statement.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
And the reading of the vision statement.
Richmond Community Schools, a collaborative community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you. Now we have celebrations.
Trustees, I'm going to ask Mr. Hayes Baker, our communications and marketing coordinator, come to the podium to introduce tonight's honoree. Mrs. Hayes Baker, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Good afternoon. We have a very special guest tonight. His name is Henry Wickett. He's a second grader at Charles, and he got a perfect score on his IRE exam. So we're going to pull him up here, and he's going to answer some questions for you. Come on up. Right there. They're going to ask you some questions.
So this is that part I was sharing with you that may be a little weird, awkward, but you're okay. You're a superstar, and the lights are shining on you. So share with us, Mr. Henry, what are you most proud of with regard to your perfect idol in school?
I'm most proud about my IRE score because, well, like the only one in the district that got
No doubt about it. Questions for me?
I'm wondering what you like to learn about at school.
I like to read about, I like to learn about books.
You like math or reading or social studies? Reading. Okay, great. Fantastic.
What book are you reading right now? Is there a book you're reading right now?
Well, like, do you mean like at home?
Yeah, at home. Yeah.
So, I like reading the I Survived books.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
like to fire.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Great.
Will you introduce who you have with you tonight? Who you brought with you?
So I brought my grandma, my mom, my sister, and my dad.
All right. Your sister shares with me that she taught you everything you know. Is there some truth behind that? I love it. You know what? I love your humility, Henry. That's what it's all about. Other questions, board members? Comments?
Congratulations.
Wow. We are so very proud of you. And you are representing not only your classroom, your peers, but also the entire corporation. So again, congratulations, parents. Congratulations, Mr. Bauer.
Who's your teacher?
Mrs. Arns.
Okay. Very
All right.
good.
All right. But again, congratulations, young man. And we plan to see you back here in due time because I don't think this is going to be the first time you're going to be accepting a lot of awards. So congratulations.
Wonderful. Next, a 3-point.
Did he already get a picture with you?
Sure. Mrs. Hazel Baker. And I'm still a picture with Henry.
Okay, yeah.
That's
What were you doing? Cindy, do we have any side of public commentary? We do.
Yes.
I'm sure we will.
Great.
That's right. I hate to do this too. I just said I don't like this. You should probably be in there also.
Oh.
They've already told me.
And bring back the film.
Oh.
Wonderful. Okay, public commentary. So the Board of School Trustees recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on corporation matters. The board wants to ensure that the public feels welcome and that the concerns are answered in a timely, efficient manner. The maximum time for individual speakers is 5 minutes per person. The board expects personal decorum and factual information from the speaker. The president reserves the right to interrupt the speaker when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or obscene, or if it interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Comments recognizing the work of staff and students are always welcome. However, critical remarks concerning specific school personnel or students are to be made to the complaint process available in policy 8130. School board members do not respond to public comments during the meeting. The public participant will receive a personal follow-up email from the board president within a week.
April Coffin.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm April Coffin, and I have a ninth grader at Richmond High School, and then I have a fourth grader at Hibbard. I always like to say I'm a proud parent of the Richmond Community Schools. I have lots of wonderful experiences with several people within our school system. The topic I wanted to bring up, which I know everybody here is aware, is the bus transportation. So I'm less concerned about the challenges with the time. It's about the communication. So I understand we have a shortage. I work at Reed. I get shortages, trust me. What I'm not okay about is the lack of communication. So I have a fourth grader, and we live out in the country with a very long driveway. On Wednesday, April 10th, I get home at 5 o'clock. She gets home at 4 o'clock. She was not home at 5 o'clock. So I went through all of the steps of where she could be, or my husband picked her up. Nobody knew. So I called the bus garage. The person I spoke from the bus garage, I didn't recognize the voice, but she said she did not know where my child was. And she said they had not been able to reach the bus driver. So I instantly thought my child was taken from my driveway. There's new developments new housing out there. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's a lot more traffic. So I instantly tell my husband, he goes to Hibbard. There's a police officer in the parking lot. So we're concerned, where's our daughter? She has a cell phone and she left it at Hibbard. So her phone was at Hibbard. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, my child is somewhere on the Hibbard property. So anyway, when the bus garage said they did not know where my child was and that the bus driver wasn't responding, I'm a therapist. I am usually very rational and I go through all the steps before I become irrational. But I, of course, assumed the worst case. I thought my child had been kidnapped. So again, we've had tons of bus transportation issues, where I go down to the end of the driveway and sometimes we wait 10 minutes all the way to 35 minutes. And sometimes they haven't even came to pick up my children. I'm okay with that. I understand there's a shortage and I'm very patient. I am lack of communication. And so I emailed, I called Sasha Amon, no response. I emailed Karen Scout, no response. So here it is, we're all professionals and we're all in administration. I can at least be acknowledged as a concerned parent about the safety. I was looking at our vision and mission, and it's always about the success of our children. But even the 4 areas of strategic planning, all of these except number 1 have something related to my topic, right? So customer satisfaction, efficient and effective operations. I would appreciate some type of communication. So I came down to administration and Bridget was very kind and talked to me, and I really appreciated that. And I think she had brought my concerns to people, but for people that are supposed to be over the safety, it's about the safety of our children. It's one thing, if it was my 9th grader, I wouldn't have stressed, but she is 10. Someone could steal her. So for me to be told they don't know where my child is, that's a huge, I wanted to give the person training on what to tell an upset parent. That's not what you tell an upset parent. So I'll chalk that up, but I'm asking for better communication. The last week or two, I've seen some communication with parents, and really quickly. So my son is in golf, so he's in sports, but I get 10 to 15 emails or text messages about sports and nothing about bus transportation. Nothing until this last week. So again, it's not about the time. I don't care if it takes an hour and a half to get my child home. It's about the safety and the communication. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 4.0, highlights and happenings.
President Brunton, trustees, I come before you all along with cabinet to share highlights of this past 2 weeks. I as superintendent have consistently met and spoken with students, especially faculty and staff. But here recently sat down with, and will continue to sit down with our senior class, members of our senior class, just to, again, glean and gain insight as to ways in which we can improve upon our student service, student care, and student satisfaction. Per se, the one thing that was remarkable, which as a former classroom teacher, I was not as surprised to hear that our seniors had referenced that rigor was something that they would encourage us all to continue to implement and put it in motion and put it in place. They wanted to continue to be challenged at the highest level and press forward through such challenges in an academic setting. So again, it was just great to continue to spend time with students, but most importantly, to check in and gain such feedback. So I'll be meeting with them again next week. We will be visiting Dennis Middle School so that the seniors can pass on the words of wisdom, advice, tidbit takeaways here or there, as well as strategies for success as our eighth graders are preparing to transition to the freshman year at RHS. So, Mr. Baker, Elementary Education Chief.
Yep, so I don't have mine written down to read directly off of, but a week ago tonight was our incoming kindergarten and preschool registration night. We had, for the first time in a while, this was held at each individual building. In the past, we've held it at the Tiernan Center and we had a low turnout. We had about 230 students register for preschool or kindergarten last Wednesday night, and it just was a great night at every building. So it was nice to see families there, nice to see families be able to do registration at their home school.
Mr. Mark Fowler, Chief of Secondary Education.
Yeah, so last week we sent our eighth graders to New York City for their eighth grade trip at Dennis and Hibbert. And so one of the really cool things about that is we get to put Dennis and Hibbert kids together on a trip, mix them with rooms and on a bus and in experiences, which is wonderful ahead of high school, right? That they get to experience and interact with students that they wouldn't typically do. The trip was great. For the first time, we put their experiences on social media in real time. And so we got really good feedback from parents who typically don't know what their kids are seeing. But we were able to put some pictures up there real time of when they were at the Statue of Liberty and when they were at the museums and the Mets games. And so it was really, really neat. So they went, had a great time. We got great feedback. And it was a good experience. They got to go to New York City. So
And they made it back safe.
they made it back safe.
Yes, again. Mrs. Elizabeth Marwood, our Chief of Exceptional Learning.
Yeah, I want to highlight Dolca DeMott, Jose Iglesias, and Sandra Calderon from Richmond High School. They took 50 EL high school students to Morrison Reeves Libraries. They were able to take a tour of the library, get library cards, check out books, and then learn how to use valuable resources at the library to help them with their academics. So I appreciate their efforts in helping out our EL students to get access to these resources and supports that will improve not only their language skills, but their overall academic performance.
Thank you, Mrs. Marwood. This is Jamie Bolzer, our Chief of Human Resources and CFO.
Thank you. I wanted to highlight that we had some Indiana teachers are provided a voluntary opportunity to receive training in the science of reading that provides the tools they need to teach students to read using proven effective strategies. The intent of the partnership between the IDOE and Marian University was so that any educator may access ready-to-go science of reading learning modules at the most convenient time to them. The modules are voluntary and are open to all teachers who sign up. Eligible teachers may earn up to a $1,200 stipend for completion. We are thankful for the teachers that participated and for being a leader in their field of work. We understand that the completion of the modules is not an easy feat and requires a great level of discipline, time management, and genuine passion for learning. We celebrate the teachers that have completed the coursework and those that are moving towards completion. I do realize that there is a delay from when the IDOE, when they finish the modules to when the IDOE cuts the check and they send it to us. But I do want to congratulate Heather Kidd and Amy Vance from Fairview, Chastity
Mansenberger from Vale, and Kara Rush from Crestdale for successfully completing the Science of Reading coursework. They have been provided their $1,200 stipend and certificate from the IDOE. Like I said, I know many other teachers have completed it and they're waiting for that stipend, and we'll hand deliver that like we did those, and are excited to see more complete that.
And Ms. Bolton, this is Karen Scott for our Chief of Operations.
Yes, good evening. So I'm going to say an apology to our parents because it has been a really challenging couple of weeks for not only them, but for our bus garage staff. And they have lost a tremendous number of people in just a very, very short time. Their office staff is new, so I will gladly talk with you after the meeting. But one thing that I know is that they also had an unexpected death last week, and it has been a very challenging time out there for them. And they have come together and really been a team. Everybody is trying to do their best, and I just want to say thank you to them because it has been really hard, and everyone has stepped up and tried very hard to do all they can to make things as good as they can be during a challenging time. So kudos to our drivers and to the staff. They are learning quickly, but it has been a challenge. So thank you to our parents who have been understanding and patient with it because we know it is a challenge.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Other discussion? Move on to consent items.
President Brunton, trustees, I come before you all for approval. Consent items 5.01 through 5.05, as well as the addendum attached to the 5.02 human resources as presented.
I move to approve the consent items as presented with the addendum.
Second.
I have a motion by Stevens, a second by Zaleski. Any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0.
President Button, trustees, I now ask Mrs. Jamie Bolzer, our Chief of HR and CFO, to join us for action items 6.01 through 6.03. Mrs. Bolzer.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Thank you, Board of Trustees. First, I have the donations. You have 29 donations in front of you, totaling $13,553.49. And in the name of time, I will not read them individually, but graciously appreciate and ask for you to graciously approve and accept those donations.
Move for approval as presented. Second.
I have a motion by Zaleski, second by Stevens. Any questions or comments? Other than the board really appreciates all these donations from quite a variety of people and businesses to lots of different areas in our school that help our students. So thank you.
And I think we noticed that last month was down, but because it was a short month, I think this is more than normal.
Great. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 5-0.
Next, you have the 24-25 evaluation plan. So attached are the guidelines for the evaluation plans that reflect the same guidelines at the conclusion of the 23-24 school year. So those are presented for your approval. And just we have discussed that with Mr. Lee, and the cabinet also reviewed.
Need a motion?
So moved.
And I will second.
I have a motion by Zaleski and a second by Member Stevens. Any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. Vote passes 5-0.
Next, you have a 23-25 MOU between Richmond Community Schools and the Richmond Education Association. We are seeking ratification of the Memorandum of Understanding to the 23-25 Master Contract. The amendment seeks to clarify the placement schedule for the newly hired teachers for the 24-25 school year and in Appendix A2. This will ensure a newly hired teacher will not have a starting salary exceeding the experience and degree level of a teacher hired prior to the 23-24 school year with the exception of those teachers who had not received a salary increase as the result of an ineffective or needs improvement evaluation rating. The MOU will also add the payroll schedule for the 24-25 school year, which is addressed in Appendix B. The MOU is effective April 24th, 2024, and shall remain in full force and effect through the term of the 23-25 master contract. This has been obviously discussed with the REA, as they also need to ratify it because it's a mutual agreement. It has also been reviewed in final draft by Mrs. Matthews and Mr. Cross. And yesterday I received preliminary approval of the draft by the Indiana Education Employment Relations Board. So it has gone through all the checks to get to this point.
We're not anticipating any concerns from REA.
It's mainly just to clarify the language within
To clean up.
the contract. I think it's just kind of, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so this depicts what the intent of that language is, just to make sure that our principals through the hiring process and then also potential candidates can clearly see where they would come in on that placement schedule, just to protect our current teachers, but also just as a transparency measure for new hires.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
A motion by member Zaleski, second by Brand. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 5-0.
I would just like to thank Mr. Lee and Mr. Price for their willingness to help us get that done.
President Brunton, trustees, I now have Ms. Elizabeth Markwood, our Chief of Exceptional Learning, join us for action item 6.04. Mrs. Markwood.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Before you, you have an attached consulting agreement with Curtis and Livers. It's submitted for your consideration and approval for the 24-25 school year. We contract with them. They provide us an application to keep all of our special education compliance dates, evaluations, timelines. So we've used them for several years and would like to continue to utilize their application for that process.
I move to approve 6.04, the Curtis and Livers Consulting Agreement as presented.
Second.
Motion by Stevens, second by Zaleski. Any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. Vote passes 5-0.
President Brunton, trustees, I now ask that Mr. Martin Fowler, our Chief of Secondary Education, join us for action items 6.05 and 6.06. Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Good evening, trustees. The first action item is the RHS Girls Group Overnight Field Trip. So this is a class that meets regularly at Richmond High School, and they have been going through a curriculum all year. And this is kind of their end of the year celebratory trip. And so what you have before you is the itinerary for that trip, as well as the chaperones for approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Zaleski, a second by Stevens. Questions or comments? I would just say the itinerary looks great. Look, checked it out. I thought I'd like to go along.
I know, I was fun. I tell you, I was like,
It looked fun. I'm thankful for the teachers who are and the students who get to go opportunity.
How long have they been meeting?
Oh, I have it actually. I brought that. I thought that question may come up. I want to say
Sorry about it.
it's the 9th overnight field trip, but I want to say 3 or 4 years that it's been a group and a class. So, yeah. So it's got a really good response at the high school, and we're excited for them.
We have so many things that are going on. I'm sorry to think at the time. We have a lot of things that are going on that we really don't know about. And I'm really not familiar with exactly what all they do or what it takes to get into the viewing audience.
Sure.
If it is somebody else is interested in becoming a part of it in the future.
I would love to. I asked her to send me kind of a synopsis because I thought maybe that would come up. So
We got to
This-
discuss this.
This year, yeah, right on the team. So this year, their curriculum, what they've been working on is self-esteem, communication, healthy relationships, financial literacy, mental health. And then they have guest speakers from the community that come in and speak to those. And so my understanding is it's an elective. And so kids are free to sign up. And Miss Rising's the teacher and she does a wonderful job.
Of course, you know what my follow-up question is going to be to that.
What's that?
We have the same thing from young men.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, something to look at.
Yeah.
Because I mean, with everything that's going on today when it comes to self-esteem and success as a result of the esteem that one gains, it leads to success in the classroom and after graduation and going on. And at-risk teens are definitely, every teen is at risk, okay? But I'm just thinking it would be beneficial, if at all possible in the future, to create something else for young men.
And to be fair, I'll talk to Miss Wolpe and we may have something similar but not that I'm aware of.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You got it.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. Vote passes 5-0.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wright. Trustees, what you have in front of you is an IU East College Now MOU for the 24-25 school year. This program is directly targeted at first-generation, historically underrepresented students, so socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So this is an MOU between us and IU East that allows those students to take 2 classes at IU East. There may be, just so that you know, an addendum from IU Bloomington on this. We have asked them to maybe, currently the agreement says 2 classes of 30 students or 60 students. What we've asked is, can you just give us 60 students? So that would give us some freedom. They accepted that. They said, hey, yeah, that's a really good idea. We'll look at that and send you back a new agreement. But I wanted to put this in front of you for approval so that we can enter this agreement for them. And if they come back with an amendment giving us 60 seats rather than 2 classes of 30, I'll bring that back.
Move for approval.
Motion by Zaleski, second by Pickering. Questions or comments?
I just had a question. I was looking through here and I was just trying to look again. If we are limited, and I know it has some criteria, but do we foresee or, what sort of what if we don't fill the 60? Does it sort of get open to everyone? Is it?
So core 40, 3.0 is preferred. You can have a 2.5 if you have a counselor recommendation. Currently, we don't have the 30 seats. We don't fill 30. So
Okay.
Part of that is because of the influx of college core classes that are now being offered during the instructional day. That's for certain students who had to maneuver their schedules so that they could do the college now. They no longer have to do that, right? And so we still offer it because there are students who will go above and beyond. They'll take it online, and so those seats are for that. But we are offering so many more ACP and dual credit courses that kids can just do it during the school day. They don't have to go off campus. However, we do like this agreement because it gets our kids on a college campus. Right. It gets them in that setting, and especially for first generation, it's a wonderful opportunity. So perfect.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 5-0.
President Button, trustees, for action item 6.07, I ask that Mrs. Karen Scout, our Chief Operations, join us for approval. Scout.
Good evening again. On March 21st at 2 p.m., the bids were received on the RHS RTV and radio area HVAC project. The only bidder was Thor Construction with a base bid of $1,223,000. We had an alternate one bid of $45,000 and an alternate two bid of $139,000. This bid is in excess of the projected budget, and it is recommended that we reject this bid, provided that a rebid on the project would allow us to change a bit of the project scope and description. One thing that we found in the post-bid interview was that there were some questions on some of the areas that we believe if we can rebid will be better answered with the response that is more in line with the budget. And that's something, the work is the same. It's just that some of those areas that were bid a little bit higher than expected. And we can make that full project happen in a different way. And so the rebid would allow further alternates and provide the district with an ability to complete the full project available with the budgeted funds that we have. So the necessity of the rebid has been communicated with the bidder. They did expect it. They actually offered some information to us that provided us with the ability to talk through that and understand what that meant. And so that is, they understand that this bid would have to be rejected. That is one portion of this recommendation. The second portion of this recommendation is just due to the timeliness of grant deadlines, equipment timelines, and installation timelines. It's requested that we rebid this project and advertise that as soon as possible. So the LWC is already working on the new bid packet, but it will need to be re-advertised prior to the next board meeting. So in an effort to get this going so that we can complete it this summer as expected, I am requesting that we re-advertise and rebid this project. The notice would then publish in the Palladium item 2 times, 1 week apart, at least 7 days prior to the opening of the bid. And the bid date and opening and advertisement dates will be posted as soon as the packet is ready. The last part of this recommendation is simply because we, as we have worked through the high school roof, we found out that there is the ability to get the test roof replaced this summer if we get it bid now. So we are having significant leaks at that building that we had to fix over this spring. They have been growing steadily more in the number as we've gone through the wet spring. Everything is handled, but we do need to get a roof on that building this summer if possible. So I am requesting that we advertise that bid as soon as that bid packet is ready. LWC is very close with that, so it should be ready within the next week or 2 at the most. But the finalization of the specifications is still working. And so I did want to go ahead and ask for a request to advertise that so that we can get that notice out to bidders in order to get that roof on this summer. So with that, this is a 3-part recommendation. Actually, yeah, a 3-part. So the first being to reject the bid received on the RHS RTV radio HVAC project and to request to advertise to bid the project. And the next is to advertise the bid for the test roof replacement. And all of the documents associated with the bid are in the packet on board docs.
Madam President, I move to approve 6.07 bid items as presented.
A motion by member Stevens. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Zaleski. Any questions or comments?
Is it unusual that we approved the advertising before we got the packet?
Not when the packet's already been done once. Now, as far as the test roof, it's a very cut and dry. They are nearly done. It's just some of those little final pieces, and I didn't want to give it to you in pieces. So what I can do is I will add that packet in here to the board section. We do not post those for public viewing until it's been advertised anyway. So I can send that to you prior to it going to advertisement. That is not an issue. We'll get that out to you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I know I saw the statement. We'll have to do the rest of the test group. So I guess my question is, would we save money if we tried to do it all? Can you bid for sort of what we know we have to do and
We can do
all of
it the full as an alternate, and that way we would know.
But I just
That's not a problem at all.
As we work through these,
Yep.
We kind of talked about we might not all be here by the time we get to that point, and I would rather sort of see that money,
Okay,
or see what it would be, and then we can make that decision.
that's fine. I would be happy to do that.
Okay.
If that's the will of the board, I 100% would be willing to do that.
Great.
So I think the understanding is that itself would be an alternate.
Correct.
Right, but I
Because
think,
our experience has always been that you don't get any value with deduct change orders. You get the value with the competitive ad alternates.
Right. I think it's just important to kind of see what those full numbers are, and then
Make the decision which way you want to go at that time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 5-0.
President Brunton, trustees, I now ask that Mr. Jamie Bolzer, our Chief of HR and CFO, join us for a presentation regarding a recent survey that she now has results and data to share. Some feedback.
Thank you. I think we're getting it put up so that it's in your packet so that you can walk through with it, and then we have it on the overhead here so that anybody in attendance can also walk through with it as well. So the employee retention survey results, also you can refer to it as a culture assessment. So in an effort to continue to pay close attention to our workforce culture, maintain our focus on retention, and introduce new practices that regularly seek all employee feedback to take the pulse of employee sentiment, we asked our staff to complete an employee retention survey in February, as well as an employee intent to return survey in April. Both surveys were voluntary, and individual responses will remain confidential. The employee retention survey focused on the pulse of the culture with 253 responses, where the employee intent to return survey gauged the employee's intention to return for the following year with 457 responding. The overall data will be used to review, reflect, and revise our current practices to maximize employee retention. Graphic slide. The what employee type best describes you. This is of the first is the culture assessment, if you will, the gauge of where the culture is at. You can see of the 253 responses, this is just to show you the makeup of those that responded. We had 66.4% respond that are teachers, and then you can see the other employee types just to show you the makeup. That is that's indicative of our overall employee makeup. So we had a good representation of all of our staff is what that slide's showing you. Moving to the next slide. Again, this is just to show you what building that they're attached to. We will obviously have the most respond from the high school because that's where most of our employees reside. But again, what that's showing you is a very good makeup of those that are responding and providing input for each of the buildings. Moving to the next, the engagement section. Is your job satisfying? This is just a first pulse to see on an overall broad scale what that looks like. We have 61% that say that their jobs are satisfying, with 34% saying somewhat. However, what I think is most important is because we started this analysis and this where we're receiving, some of this data, we started last year. So now we have a comparative to see where we've moved from. So in the next slide, you can see in comparison to the 2023 responses to the 2024, you can see a 3.8% growth in job satisfaction from somewhat satisfied to satisfied. And we did see an overall decline in staff that are not satisfied. So those are the two areas that you wanted to see a growth in and a decline in. So that is showing that there is movement in the satisfaction of the jobs. Moving to the next slide is, there's so many different ways that you can categorize all this data. There are certainly multiple regression analysis that do take place. One of those is we did take a look at based off of the employment type compared to the yeses that we received, the somewhats to the no. And you can see that slide is categorizing, where our no's and our somewhat and some of the areas that we need to concentrate on. Then moving to the next slide, we did the same thing. That's just to show the percent scale for, again, by employment type, not by the yes or no, but by the employment type. Moving on to the next slide is we began to look at the breakdown by building. Of course, we have the regression to show by building employee type. So we certainly broke it down a lot further than this to see if there's certain areas of focus. But this is just an overall summary to show, at the secondary level compared to the elementary. And then I did bucket Baxter and Hibbert just because they kind of span over both of those as well as our district employees. And like I said, we certainly do break that down and categorize it even more so by employee type and by location. And those are areas of concentrated needs that we can focus on. Moving to the next slide. Again, that is just breaking it down again instead of by the answer of yes, somewhat, and no, but by the individual employee type. Moving on. One of the things that we looked at last year when reviewing this data was those that responded that are not satisfied. What's the makeup and degree of those? Because sometimes what that data can show you is, again, some area focal points. You can see that there was a slight decrease in those that responded no, that they're not satisfied. But you can see that we targeted certain areas from last year's response because we had a percentage of other support staff, maintenance, custodial, as well as classroom support, where this year the makeup was still with teachers, but then also classroom support. But we've decreased the volume of those that are not satisfied. So again, those are just some bucketed areas, and those are some good where we can do some targeted responses based off of their building levels as well. And even to the subject area that's taught, we could see some trends on certain subject areas that are taught as well. Moving on to the next slide. How often do you feel proud about something that you achieve at work? I was pleased to see this response and to see that the rarely and never has diminished some. It's at 4.4%. Moving to the next slide, and I'll come back to that a little bit. But we really wanted to see what they would consider the most challenging aspect of their position. Obviously, this is a lot of information, but when you start having data to compare it to, you can start to see, again, areas that need to be focused on. You can see the biggest pieces of that pie are student discipline and behavior, a lack of effective communication, balancing different learning needs were certainly the biggest slices of that pie. Moving to the next slide. This is just doing that same comparison from 23 to 24 based off of those responses. What I liked seeing is a lot of those lines are declining or have stabilized. You do see a couple areas that have grown. Again, those are the bigger slices of that pie. it being the effective communication and student discipline behavior. So that shows you that in some regards, some of our focused efforts in some of the areas have had great success and achievement, but we just need to continue to focus on some other areas. The next slide is just again showing you a comparison of those percentages that make up those pieces of the pie, so that again, the more data you have in different elements and the more regressive analysis that can be done, you can begin to concentrate your resources and efforts. The next slide, rate the overall workload on a scale of 1 to 10. We have a staff that predominantly feels that they're overworked. Now, what I will say is you take this same slide and you present it to any other school and those that are in education, it will certainly mimic this, so this is not an outlier at all. Moving to the next slide, how likely would you be to recommend a job at Richmond Community Schools to a family member or friend? 79.1% said that they were highly likely to somewhat likely to refer somebody to work here. If you look at the next slide, what's wonderful about that is the growth of 10 points to that. So again, that shows concentrated increases and improvement in what our overall culture looks like. The next slide focuses mainly on this next section is the workplace culture. Do you feel like you can be yourself around your supervisor? We saw a 4.3% growth in yes from 2023. The next is, do you feel like you can be yourself around your coworkers? We saw a 3% growth in yes from comparison from the prior year. And you'll see that that's a common theme as we go through here. There's growth from the prior year. The next slide, do you feel like you can bring problems to your supervisor? And if so, that your supervisor will address them. There's 4.3% growth that our staff feels more able to bring any concerns to their supervisor. So that was a great data point to see as well. The next is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think your employer values your contribution? Again, obviously with any data analysis, you're going to see areas that there was a almost 2% growth in points from 6 to 10, which means our staff is feeling more valued. Moving to the next slide. This is just how they feel like their coworkers value their contribution. This was an interesting one, and I think it needs probably a little bit more data. It showed a slight decline in the points 6 through 10. That could potentially also be that there's 1 through 10 options where maybe we just need to start. The reason I kept it consistent was so that we could do this comparison. Maybe that could be a 1 to 5, so it's not as a wide range of data. But I tried to keep all the questions consistent from last year to this year, just so that we could see and compare, hey, is what we're doing, are we moving in the right direction? The next slide, rate how RCS is responsive to the core needs within the workplace. You have compensation pay, job security, opportunities to use skills and ability, physical environment, feeling valued, and effective communication. I'm going to go ahead and have you skip to the next slide because that's the comparative between the 2 years. And this is the one that I jumped to and said yes, because you can start to see really those trend lines start to increase. The compensation pay really kind of jumped off the page and exceptional growth there. You're seeing as far as the opportunities to use the skills and their abilities increased. The feeling of value has increased. Moving to the next slide, career development. This is an interesting one that between the survey results, but also just in feedback from some of the mobile visits between last year and this year. Some of that direct feedback that we were getting from some of our staff, not just our certified staff, but our paraprofessionals that were in the classroom supports, was they wanted additional training. So we really tried to make it an effort to provide as much additional training that we could. We approached our new hires differently. We didn't just do a throw everything at them as they were onboarding. We tried to spread that out. And I really want to recognize the e-learning team, because that was something they actually came and to us and launched. That would be Jeremy Hill, Tim Arnold, and Joni. So I was very pleased with that recommendation. We can see some of that in some of these results. Also, Mrs. Markworth saw and received a paraprofessional training grant, and that has been very well received. She's seeking that again, and trying to say, okay, how can we even say, let's take what we've done and keep expanding on it. So as we go through this, you will see that, with almost 80% of our staff saying yes, they have received those training opportunities. That's a great reflection to see. And even more so that you can see that the growth from last school year to this school year, you can see that those efforts people are recognizing and are feeling more trained. Going to the next, have you encountered any new opportunities within the corporation that will help you on your career path? I felt like that was a pretty good, some are applicable depending on what they necessarily do. One more slide over. But overall, I felt like that was a better indication. There was a 4.8% growth in yes from last year to this year. So again, we saw growth in this data set. Moving to the next, are you getting value out of your current training and development? Again, there was growth, 2.6% growth in yes. And then there was a decline in the no. So those are the two areas you want to grow in and decline in. So that was good to see. Moving next, and I'm sorry I'm flying through this, but I know time is of the essence. Have you and your supervisor set expectations about your progress at Richmond Community Schools? There was an 8% growth in yes. And that means, that we're also developing our building level leaders as we go, with a lot of them being newer in their positions, but you're seeing that growth module again. Moving to the next, the compensation section. I think at first glance, people would say, oh no, because you have over half that say no, they don't feel like it's fairly compensated to like or compared positions working elsewhere. But if you look at the next slide, this was the biggest growth that we have seen in any data set. There was almost 30% growth from last year to this year. And so hopefully, that's obviously being recognized that we have concentrated our efforts in making sure our staff is well compensated or better compensated. So the yes grew a lot and the no declined a lot. So there's still work to be done, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. The next slide, would you take a new job at another corporation if they offered you the current salary that you make? Again, at first, that no grew, and so that's a piece of the slide that you like to see. But if you go to the next slide, again, that comparison, there was growth in that data set as well. So more people are saying, I want to stay right here, even if it's the same amount, which is a great data comparison to measure culture on. I really like these last two slides. Are you satisfied, the next slide, with compensation package that you currently receive? And we're going to go ahead and just skip to the next slide because that's the comparative from last year to this year. And again, you can see growth. You can see a decrease where it needs to and growth in some of the others. Insurance benefits are something that we're looking at. That yes, although that yes went up, we're looking at insurance benefits, making sure that we're the most competitive in that area as well. But there was certainly growth that we saw there. The management section, does your supervisor provide you with the support you need to complete your work? We had almost 7% growth in that data set from last year to this year. So again, it's movement in the right direction. Moving to the next slide. How would you rate your supervisor's communication with your team? This is very similar to the previous year. Again, I think the biggest area is it's kind of, I think, it shows relevant to some of the other where we need to make sure that we're working on effective communication. The next, here, are you satisfied with the recognition you received from your supervisor? We saw growth in that data point too, and that is something that we have tried to work on, is making sure that people, even if it's delivering a $1,200 stipend, we're not just sending that through inter-office mail. We wanted to make sure that we personally delivered that, and it was a personal touch, because those are the things that really make people feel valued, and that they are being recognized for their extra efforts that they're doing. So we have taken again, a more focused approach on making sure that people feel recognized and valued. The next, so basically, the next couple slides are just the intent to return survey, which was the one that was just completed. You can see from that next slide that the employees, again, it's a good makeup of our staff. The next slide shows again the makeup of the building, so it's a good representation. We had a huge, this is actually the largest response to a survey that we have had, is this intent to return survey. Is it 100%? No, but I think it is going to be a good representation of the intent. The next slide, you can see we're at almost, well, just over 93% of the yes. Some of those too within that, and I could have really broken that down and gone into it even more, but some of the no's, well, actually all the no's, but I think one from the survey results were retirees. Well, of course, they're not going to return, you know. Although what I will tell you, and looking at and reviewing all the data, is a lot of our retirees said that they would like to come back and sub. So that is a wonderful, I thought, a wonderful point too that we got to see. And the last slide I'm going to leave you with is something I had in last year's, and I truly believe this is culture is going to eat the strategy and any change in performance and innovation that you're looking at for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So culture is a good assessment of making sure that you're moving things in the right direction. Thank you.
Mrs. Moser, thank you, ma'am. And of what has been presented, you know, anecdotally, we have different feelings. There's perception, but with data, we're able to confirm what it is that so many folks have or witnessed to. They passed. A few years, I know they were charged. You all put forth me as superintendent to our central office leadership team, our building level leaders, our teachers, students alike. This data is really proving to confirm that we're on the right track. Organizational health, we've heard Dr. Rice reference that in our previous board retreats, as well as even Mr. Horton from ISBA and others that have emphasized the importance of organizational health. And that's the last slide Mrs. Moser concluded, Pac-Man graphic. And as we know and as we're seeing, it's so true. You've heard me reference our visionary perspective, quality tier 1 instruction, systemic alignment, social emotional supports of the data that was presented. All of those aspects are being addressed and hit on in more than one way. Intentionality, collaboration, and most importantly, sustainability is what it is we're going to continue to strive to press forward. Knowing that the instructional frameworks with NIET as well as the principal standard, we're seeing some of the data in which our faculty and staff, field supervisors, leadership has improved. That again lets us know that we're on the right track. And then overall morale, as Mrs. Bolzer alluded to, and as the data confirms. Again, we're on the right track, but most importantly, sustainability. We got to continue to work and continue to put forth the effort. So thank you, Mrs. Bolzer.
Don't ever get comfortable, because
that's right. That's right. Human capital is always only.
That's right.
I have a couple questions. So when we talk about supervisor, can we make the assumption that teachers are talking about building principles? Are we talking about team leads? Do we know, like, what do they count?
We got gotten a lot of the individualized responses, I think, because you could see direct supervisor compared to supervisor even above them. You know, some people look at central office as like the hub over more so individual direct supervisor, I would say first. However, you could see by some of the additional categorization of the data responses, you could start to really see if they meant building level or higher level.
Got it.
Yeah.
We also include department chairs, or faculty
Yeah.
staff, so department chairs as well.
Okay. Going along with that, so that was when, and maybe this is, you've got individual responses about bringing issues to the supervisor. Is it, or maybe you could provide some feedback, is it overall problems? Is it overall when they talk about workload? Is it life in general? Is it specific to class size? Is it, did you get a sense out of that? Because, you know, I know sometimes when you're overwhelmed in general, it can be, someone said, are you overwhelmed with your job? Well, yes, but it could be a million different things that play into that. So
I think one of the common threads is something that we heard before with an increase in our EL population numbers. That's providing additional concerns. And sometimes, you know, some of those things take additional funding options and trying to find the core of how we can sustain, to Dr. Wright's point, sustain something moving forward to correct. I would say student behavior was something too that I pulled out, and different learning needs as obstacles that really stood out. And you could individualize some of that by building as well.
But also to piggyback just briefly, I think it also gets at the heart of your question. Our building level leaders, as we have continued to develop, provide the open door policies that are found in each building, in which faculty and staff felt comfortable approaching our principals, having conversations, bringing any and all matters, suggestions, guidance, advice, has been positive in more ways than
I agree.
And as a result, I think that also contributes to some of the response we're seeing in the data, the comfort, the level of authenticity that is generated.
and my last little comment is just, I did like the question about can you be yourself? It seems like we have a positive trend on that. I think it's just huge in the workplace of, you know, can you just kind of go in and do your thing and not worry about, you know, trying to be someone else. So
Me too. I think that's the heart of making a larger school corporation feel like a family team environment is that question.
that's awesome.
Thank you for pulling together the data. We know it's important. We need to hear it, so I appreciate that you making that priority of putting it together in a way that we can easily see those trends and also know that we still have some work to do.
Yep.
But we also will continue, as we've discussed, to celebrate the small stuff
Yes.
and the big stuff, but and that celebratory acknowledgement also extends to those who are in the classroom, the students, faculty, and staff, our association, community. It's all one huge family.
And I think I'll leave with this is when I coached, try never coach to the scoreboard. You try, and I think the teachers saying, you know, they don't want to coach to a test. They don't want, same thing for us. We can't necessarily make decisions and everything based off of a test or based off of student achievement. However, if you break it down and you focus as much as you can on the individual aspects, kind of like if you focus on getting on base, or if you focus on minimizing errors, or if you focus on not giving up extra bases and those sorts of things, the things that you can control, if you focus on those and put your energy and effort there, then everything else will start to result in the way that you need it to. So I think that's kind of what you're starting to see as we break down and compartmentalize some of the efforts and trying to say we've got to focus here, here. Hopefully what you're going to see is that scoreboard start to take care of itself.
They can just go.
Take my coaching hat off.
Great. We are to item 8 of the policy review with updates. Hoping that we can bundle move these together, bundle and save. That's right.
We, having been posted for the public to review as well as us. I move that we move policy 8.01 to 8.12 to second reading.
So there's a motion to move all the policies presented here by Stevens. A second?
Second.
Motion by Stevens, a second by Pickering. Any comments or questions?
Just one comment on 8.02, the policy for public participation. In there, I think that we've had some previous discussion on this. We permit 5 minutes time in regards to public commentary, which we are very generous by that because most public entities, including school boards, corporations, councils, and all, reserve that for 3 minutes only. We continue to do 5. However, because it's stated up to 5 minutes in here, based upon the issue and the number of individuals that may be signed up, it is still at the discretion of the board to reduce that to under 5 minutes. I want to be perfectly clear about that.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 5-0. Okay, we are at board reports and discussion. Are there any board reports and discussion? Are there any discussion items?
Well, policy met last week. That was very, again, uplifting. It's a fun time.
We're a fun group.
It's a fun group, you know. But there have been some points made by Member Pickering to each of us in regards to some of the things, as well as Ms. Bolzer and Mr. Moms too. So again, it's exciting. I would recommend that if you do get the opportunity next one, stop in and get some valuable experience on how to review those. How simple it is. The discussion is very good.
And when you sent a reminder out to us, I know you sent one, Kim, about what, I think it's April 28th is our,
Yes.
we need the board to respond
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Okay,
And Mr. Mops provided us with that list again, and I'll send you that.
Okay.
Notes.
perfect. Thank you.
And just sort of just go through and if you all, I think we identified the ones we did have questions, or it just said review, or maybe no one has the question anymore, just sort of, yeah. Remove your name. I do, some of these too that roll out and they kind of roll into other thoughts and questions. Sort of policy change, but
Okay. Any other board reports or discussion? We'll move on to item 10, the preview of the upcoming meetings and events.
President Button, trustees, on Wednesday, May 8th, 2024 at 5:30, right here in the boardroom, we will be conducting a work session. And during that time, we will be presenting to our board, educating as well as engaging in dialogue amongst one another and those patrons that choose to be part of the work session. As for the adjournment and bell ringer, typically I would bring Mrs. Bridget Hazelbaker, our marketing communications coordinator, to the podium. However, Mrs. Hazelbaker, I'm going to try and commandeer this because this is where our hearts get a little heavy. First and foremost, with the approval of the Human Resource Report and addendum, we are wishing the very best. And I say this sincerely, and I'll try and say it without emotion. We wish the best to Mrs. Jamie Bolzer, who got the call from the big leagues, as they would say on the south end of town, and will be reporting to the Department of Local Government and Finance to serve in a very prestigiously high position with our State Department. And as we know, Mrs. Bolzer has had a political experience, many scales and ranges, and this position allows her not only to exercise and maximize her talents as a successful politician, but also exercise her talents with her concrete sequential mindset as a fiscal superstar. And so Mrs. Bozer, on behalf of the cabinet, I'll allow board to wish you and send you off, but publicly, we can't thank you enough for what it is that you have selflessly done for Richmond Community Schools. We know that your heart is always going to be here in Red Devil Country. She's allowing us to stay tethered to her, as this is a unique time in the school year. But one thing that she stated is that she's not going to leave us in the cold, and she's going to allow us to stay tethered to her as we wrap up this semester and get prepared for the 24-25 school season. And so, Mrs. Bozer, again, it's been a pleasure. I love you. I thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
I said what I had to say, and we shared that, so I felt that even more now. So thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, sir.
We appreciate you, Jamie, for playing with you and everything that you've done and brought to our school system, our teachers, and the culture we've seen here, and our trickle down to our students. So thank you.
For 30 years, board, we have had a self-serving transportation specialist, bus driver, named Linda Langman, that poured her heart not only into this corporation, into the multitude of buses that she drove, but most importantly, into the kids that she kept safe on a daily basis. Mrs. Langman passed away after 30 years of service last week. I believe it was Mrs. Scalf. And as Mrs. Scalf alluded to during her highlight, we know that our family there in the transportation department, as well as families all over the city, have been in mourning. And so we extend to Mrs. Lehman's family the deepest levels of respect and appreciation, thoughts, and prayers as she has moved on to a better place. The second RCS employee that we also have lost since our last meeting is Mrs. Patsy Baker. Patsy Baker served for 47 and a half years. That's an educator. 44 and a half were here in RCS. Mrs. Baker and I, along with so many students on the south side, as well as all sides of our city, serve kids with the level of fight and vigor that you would hope to find in all educators. Forgive me for my emotion, but as a little kid at C.R. Richardson Elementary School, it was Patsy Baker and so many others that pulled us along, taught us how to pull our bootstraps up, make no excuses, and get the job done. And so for that, to Mrs. Baker, to her family, to the association that she served with the same type of fight and vigor, we say thank you. We love what it is that she embodied in speaking with the Fairview community on the day in which she was being celebrated. The question is how we would explain to the kids who Patsy Baker was. And the one thing that we all agreed upon is that we would say and share with kids that Patsy Baker fought for what was right, that she fought for her fellow neighbor. And most importantly, she fought to protect kids. She protected me personally. She protected so many folks. And so we thank her for her service. The services for both will be online. We thank those who responded, the grief responders, the drama, therapy dogs, additional counselors, the Fairview Community Association, RCS as a whole, the state. There's so many that they really poured out to pour into one another. And so for that, we send off Mrs. Baker the best we can, and also Mrs. Layton the best we can. And I ask that we acknowledge a moment of silence. Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.